VikesNow, I'm Dustin Baker. It is the February 21st edition, less than 3 weeks away from free agency, about 2 months and a week away from the NFL draft. And as of late, there's been a lot of banging of the drum for the Vikings to maybe draft a quarterback that succeeds Kirk Cousins. Anthony Richardson is the hot topic, I'd say, over the last week. And so let's get this out in the open. If the Vikings end up drafting Anthony Richardson, fantastic. Great. This guy is all for it. I would love to prepare for the future. Kirk Cousins is going to be 35. That's a new element to the annual Kirk Cousins debate, is that he could regress as soon as September, or he could go strong until age 40. Nobody knows. So I want to get it really out in the open that if it's Anthony Richardson as the next guy, I'm elated. Let's do it. But I want to discuss with you the means by which to obtain the man, if indeed they get him at all. So my first little why you should pump the brakes here, at least on any sort of trade to get the Florida Gator guy, is it's a massive gamble on him. He emphatically is not in a Trevor Lawrence or Andrew Luck type of, guarantee to be somewhat good in the league. He is considered a guy with tremendous upside. And that is fine. Let's try it again. I would be really excited to have that type of skill set, whether it takes a year to develop or 3 years to develop on the Vikings. Throw back to the Dante Culpepper era, the good parts of it. And again, let's do it. But I don't want the Vikings to trade way up the board for a guy who is considered a gamble. I don't think that is what trade up the boards are reserved for. And I honestly think that Kwesi Adofo-Mensah will trade down no matter what this YouTube show or any of you say about Anthony Richardson. I don't think it will be him. So it's neither here nor there. But I don't support a trade up the draft board for a guy who's considered a maybe. I think the biggest beefs with Richardson when you watch the tape or you read some of the draft scouting material is his inaccuracy. And if you're in the business of exploring a trade up the board, I don't know how high you'll have to go to get him. Maybe the top 10. You're going to have to get up a lot of draft assets. And do you really want a dude who's not very accurate? If you're going to get rid of Mr. Cousins, who throws 4,000 passing yards and 30 touchdowns, and we just take it for granted, we're like, oh, yeah, a lot of guys can do that. No, they can't. Do you really want to get in bed with somebody whose main problem is inaccuracy? I guess, and just kind of assume that he'll figure that out on the fly. Again, it's a gamble in that aspect. And then, also on Richardson, it's these strange Malik Willis parallels. Not necessarily that they're the same guy or anything like that, but it's the same folks that are suddenly in this Vikings community that are advocating for Anthony Richardson, baby, are the same people that did this last year for Malik Willis. And yeah, Malik Willis, the verdict's still out. He could turn into a great quarterback. Certainly didn't look like it at all in 2022, but I would be cautious and just a little skittish, like the same crew that is saying Anthony Richardson at all costs said the same thing about Malik Willis last year, and look how that turned out. The guy didn't even go until the third round, and there were folks advocating he would be a top 10 talent. And yikes, if any team would have selected Malik Willis in the top 10, that would have been catastrophic, because this day and age, when you draft a quarterback that high in the draft, that guy's got to play in year one. Didn't used to be that way when I was a kid. You can let the first round guy in the top 10 develop for 1 to 3 years, but it doesn't work that way anymore. You have to put that guy in, see what he's got, and get going. And with Malik Willis, the way that some people missed on his draft projection was outlandish. The guy couldn't even beat out Josh Dobbs in a meaningless Week 18 game. And then when the bright lights were on, they didn't even want to roll with him in the postseason. And if you have a quarterback of the future like that, you can't even trust to throw the ball in a Week 18 game. I guess that game wasn't meaningless. That game was, or was that the one where they were locked into position no matter what? Yes, that's what it was. They wanted to They went with Josh Dobbs to give him momentum going into the postseason game when it would have been the perfect opportunity to see more Malik Willis, but they didn't want anything to do with it. So it's like a twilight zone. Last year at this time, Malik Willis was being careened up the board by some, and I was like, I don't know. I don't see it. And now Richardson might have a better skill set, but I kid you not. We did the same thing with Malik Willis last year, and now we're counting our blessings that he's not the guy that's in line to replace Cousins. And then here's the deal. So the Vikings have the 23rd pick. If Anthony Richardson falls to them at that, or any of those, Will Levis, those guys aren't falling to 23. But in theory, if they did, fine. That is a reasonable spot where you don't have to trade anything. Then you take a flyer on Richardson, who has this fabulous upside, and then you plot the life after Cousins. But if the asking price to climb the board to get a quarterback, in this case Richardson, is going to be 3 first-rounders or 2 first-rounders, that's just too much for a maybe. The guy is a maybe right now. You might watch Richardson and be like, I know he's not a maybe. But it's not, the world doesn't agree with you. And that's what makes me nervous. If we keep really just saying, like, all right, this guy is the next big thing. We think he's Lamar Jackson in terms of his draft stock. He's going to be a steal. And he goes all the way in, like, a top 10, top 9 pick. Then the Vikings will have to trade 3 first-rounders to get the guy. And do you want to do that for a maybe? I do not. I would rather find a semi-guaranteed commodity before you trade the farm for the next quarterback, especially when the guy you already have on the roster delivers 30 touchdown passes like the crow flies. I think that's my main fear, is that we're sick of Kirk Cousins and we want to get into something that's different, younger, sexy, cheaper for 5 years. And then you get him and you're like, oh, well, he's not very good. Now what? Then you're looking around saying, God, we're going to have to hit free agency and see if we can find a quarterback who can just throw 4,000 yards consistently. And, we'll be looking back and be like, we had that. So, I know Cousins doesn't excite everybody, and that's fine. In the playoff game there, in the final drive, threw short of the sticks. And, some people were back to their old detractor ways, and I totally get it. I think if you're going to explore the notion of trading that high, I don't know where it will be, to get Richardson, then you've got to probably explore getting rid of Kirk, because if your general manager trades 2 or 3 first-rounders for this quarterback, do you really want him to sit on the bench for 2 years? It'll feel like do you have the patience for that? If you're trading up to get your guy, that guy should really start sooner than later, and probably week 1 of the upcoming season. So and it's not an easy task to trade Kirk because he has a no-trade clause. You'd have to chat right now the teams that I think would be the Patriots, the Jets, maybe the Buccaneers. That would take him, and then Cousins would have to greenlight the trade. But if you're in the business of trading oodles of draft capital to get to the quarterback of the future that, so deprived in, Vikings lore, then do you really want that guy to watch and learn for 2 years if you're trading a king's ransom to get him? No, you wanted to get him going right away like the rest of the world does it. I think the biggest beef that I have with this idea on the whole is when you're ready to be done with Cousins, and I know that's coming. I know he's 35, and there's been 5 seasons and 1 playoff win, haven't got out of the divisional round. I know it's a large sample size, and it's probably time to explore the next guy. But in this conversation about trading draft capital to the tune of 2 or 3 first-rounders, I want a more sure thing than Anthony Richardson. I want to be set up. I want to go into week 1 with close to like the Trevor Lawrence feeling, where the guy is going to be good. Because if you trade 3 firsts for a maybe in Richardson or whoever, and that guy doesn't work out, well, you can kiss the head coach goodbye. He's gone. Kwesi's probably also gone because he's the one that orchestrated the trade. So in the end, I trust Kwesi Adofo-Mensah and Kevin O'Connell to make a decision. If that's Richardson, so be it. But when you start exploring like a 49ers trade for Trey Lance where you're giving up all of that capital, I would just really like it to be a more sure thing than some guy who, there's some that say that Anthony Richardson shouldn't even sniff the first round. That's how undeveloped he is. Like, he's got upside through the roof, but he's not going to be ready for a while, if at all. And I really don't want the Vikings to leverage their future just because it's time to draft a young quarterback because everybody else does it. And here's the thing. Throughout Vikings history, especially as of late, starting with Christian Ponder, the Vikings don't lag behind in drafting quarterbacks with early round draft capital. They flat out don't. The Vikings' problem is when they draft these quarterbacks, they don't get it right. Whether it was Christian Ponder, flat out didn't get it right. Teddy Bridgewater succumbed to injury, and they didn't want to. I guess they preferred Cousins over Bridgewater, and Bridgewater really hasn't amounted to too much other than a dazzling QB2. And then the Kellen Mond flyer, a third-rounder, that didn't work out either. So one of the talkers that you will continue to see from various forms of Vikings media is that they never draft a quarterback of the future. No, this is false. They've tried repeatedly, and it's about at a normal rate in NFL history of drafting quarterbacks in rounds 1, 2, or 3. It's just that when they do, they've struck out and not drafted the right guy, or in Dante Culpepper's situation, he was hurt, 6, 7 seasons into it? So it's an erroneous talker that throughout history, the Vikings don't draft quarterbacks. No, they draft the quarterbacks at a normal clip. They don't choose the right one, and then as a solution for that not to happen again, they hit free agency to find a more guaranteed thing. That's why they went through the string when I was a kid of all these veterans, Jeff George, Randall Cunningham, I guess Brad Johnson was their own, but Donovan McNabb, all of those free agent veterans that they used were because somebody realized that, man, this drafting a quarterback thing is not a guarantee, and I'll be damned if we're going to miss again. And that's how they ultimately got Cousins in 2018, because they missed on Ponder, regrettably missed on Bridgewater because of the knee shattering on that fateful August, September day, whatever it was in 2016. So it's a different philosophical approach. In summary, on Anthony Richardson, I am all for giving him a whirl, grooming him to be the next guy, but I don't think that they should even contemplate sending 3 first-rounders to get in the top 10 of the draft to get him. If he gets in that territory of he falls all the way down to 15, 16, you have to give up an extra first, I can talk myself into that. But all the recent history dating back to Robert Griffin III and the Rams and Commanders trade and all that stuff and the Trey Lance trade, I don't want anything to do with that for a guy that's a maybe. That's what I got. Tomorrow we'll be back with Josh Fry. We're going to talk about the Vikings' impending free agents. Who comes back, who does not, and we'll continue the march to free agency because that is less than 3 weeks away. Skol, baby.